say, right? It's a great place to be. I should come more often. Thanks, Hannah. It is exciting, isn't it? The more I learn about Liverpool, it's going to, I think there's so much excitement around this city, of course. So great to hear from various people doing work. And having said that, now we have Michael Gleaves, who's the Deputy Director of the Haroldtree Centre. And I think, who's mentioned earlier, I think the post over here somewhere, I think the Desbury there, Science Tech. And it's going to be really great to hear about his thoughts around collaboration, AI, and what tech they're getting involved with. Michael, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. So good afternoon. It's great to be here live in a real audience with real people. It's fantastic. So I thought a little bit what I do. I've sat and listened to some of the conversations this morning, and we've all sort of dove into the technology and AI and the applications of those AIs. So at the Haroldtree Centre, we've done over 400 applied research and innovation projects with companies across healthcare, manufacturing, engineering, life sciences. And I thought what I'd do is I'll talk you a little bit about some of the sort of taxonomy of the artificial intelligence projects that we've done and give you sort of some of the different categorizations of those. Then I'll talk a little bit about what the Haroldtree Centre is, and I'll finish with two case studies of some work we've done over the past few years, some work we did with GlaxoSmithKline on digital visualization of disease and proteins, and also some work we've done on microbiomes. So let's start with a definition. So artificial intelligence is basically applying, within a computer, human levels of skills or behavior. Now, the real advantage of that is that you can then take those tools, that process, and that process might be very specific to a very unique workflow, like the Moorfields Eye Hospital application that we talked about this morning. And then you can use that to roll it out. And the advantage of that is that you can scale up that technology almost exponentially. But there's these sort of three categories that are often talked about within artificial intelligence. And we at Haroldtree Centre mainly get involved in the sort of narrow AI, the weak AI, as it's put, which is around specific tasks and workflows. So this is visualization of the inside of a wing, the application of looking at a specific technique. Now, you also hear about general or strong AI, and there's 3 or 4 companies across the globe, Google, DeepMind, and OpenAI are probably the most well-known applications where they're looking at general purpose, the replacement of human levels of capability in a piece of software. So this is active and a strong part of research. It will come, whether it's 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, is probably how well a computer can interact with the context and context switch between the type of application it's running at. But if you think that's ever going to come, then you then have to start to think about the superintelligence, which is the sort of Nick Bostrom's definition of something that surpasses human levels of capability and is able to work in that spirit. And as you go through these applications, certainly the first two are something that's in reach, and if you get to that second one, you've definitely got the third. So let's talk a little bit about why this technology is coming around so quickly. You might have heard of general purpose technologies. So these are the technologies that apply applicably across all sectors of global commerce and activity, and also increases the amount of productivity across the globe, effectively, increasing GDP, GVA, and applications. And what you're seeing in AI is a combination of 2 or 3 specific activities. There's an exponential growth in computer power driven by Moore's law. There's the algorithm improvements particularly in neural networks and how we train neural networks. And then the availability of the data within these large data stores across the internet allows you then to pull that data together, engineer it into a system, and apply it to those algorithms. It's that combination of internet and computer power, which is effectively 2 already general purpose technologies that makes AI a third. And we're increasing the amount of general purpose technologies that we see by this combination effect that I described here. So the other part that I think about when I'm looking at projects is specifically what type of machine learning we're applying. typically, the most prevalent is this supervised learning technique. So all neural networks, so can you tell cats from dogs effectively within images, are supervised learning artificial or machine learning techniques. So what that requires is a very large data set typically and a good labeling system. The systems must be labeled into their different types. And then what you're doing is learning the neural network into a process where it can then distinguish between the cats and the dogs. That is good, but it relies on a lot of data, and it relies on highly labeled data, and that drives that application. Unsupervised learning is general knowledge, so it typically relies on clustering. You don't need a labeled data set for that type of technique, but those systems are less common within machine learning. And finally, the reinforcement learning. So if you've got controls or controls or inputs or states, then reinforcement learning can help with that. So if you're controlling manufacturing or wastewater treatment plants, then reinforcement learning will allow you to optimize that system across the platform. So we've set out the types of AI, we've set out the different sort of machine learning techniques. The next really important thing is the quality of the data you've got, but also your ability to define the outcome that you want the machine learning to get. Where you see really, really brilliant examples of machine learning where they've achieved probably ahead of time, there's usually a really clear objective function. So I've won a game of chess, I've won a game of Go, or the protein folding technique that we're using that AlphaGo created, where they took the sequence and applied it. There is a crystallography database where you can say that is the correct answer. So where it becomes more difficult is when you've got subjective, sort of objective functions. So is my strategy better than yours? Then it's more difficult to get that system to code and align the input data with the output function that you're trying to achieve within the system. And then finally, this was touched on a little bit this morning, but I think this is really important, particularly in the healthcare and medical piece. Not all AI systems are explainable. And what I mean by that is that if I say, how did you come to that solution? You can ask the system which data and which learning algorithm applied to that in a way that gave you the answer that it did. This is really important if you're applying that in a sort of medical context, because you might want to say, why? Why did you think that? Why do you think that information? And that also helps the human being who's in that process improve their understanding of the situation. It might be pointing to data that they didn't know about or an application. In that way, it's really important. Now, not all AI applications are explainable, and particularly neural networks. It's very difficult to unpick why it thinks it's a cat rather than a dog. But with say Bayesian optimization or other techniques, then that's a possibility. So after that little canter through the different types of projects that you might have within AI, I can sort of talk to you a little bit about what the Haroldtree Centre is and does. So based about 20 miles away from here, named after a chap called Douglas Rayner Haroldtree, who was a computer scientist that applied well, in the early 50s and early 60s. He was part of the generation that transitioned from digital analyzers like this, like a mechanical computer, differential analyzer, into the digital age. But what interested us about Douglas Rayner Haroldtree, and the reason we named our centre after him, is that he used his understanding of maths, access to large computers, and his ability to code to solve 200 real-world problems, from the simulation of Schrödinger's equation within the application, and even T's, Lions, tea, and biscuits ERP system. So our mission is to transform the UK by accelerating the adoption of high-performance computing, big data, and AI technologies. And what that means is we're challenge-led. We're asking the companies or the organizations we work with in order to give us a challenge, and then using our 100 trained software engineers, data scientists, and AI skilled applications people to address those problems in industrially relevant projects. So our projects are typically 6 to 2 years in length. So our services, as we offer them collaborative R&D projects, we have access to large-scale computing that we can use for training and AI and also modeling and simulation. We write software applications that we can then use to improve those projects and license. And then we also have a strong area of training and skills that we are expanding, because we can see that the skills needed to adopt this within your organization need to be present in the organization. And a little bit about the platforms. I won't go into a great deal of detail, but our biggest system is an Intel Bull-Sequana system, 4.2 petaflops. We also have GPU systems which are relevant to the AI technology, in particular the IBM Power Systems and Jade, which is an NVIDIA DGX1. Increasingly looking at quantum computing as well, and the quantum learning machine is a digital version of that. So now I will just take a little time to talk through some of our case studies. And if you're interested in the case studies that Haroldtree has applied, then you can find more of these on our website. There's about 50 or 60 there at the moment. So this is some work we did with GSK a few years ago now. So they had taken PubMed and done some natural language processing on that and created a triples database, which covered the disease, the protein, and the protein pathway associated with that information. This turned out to be a large database, and the question they were gave us is, can we find any new knowledge in this system, and particularly around a set of diseases? So what I'm showing here is the first visualization of that triples database. So this is a 22,000 node, 1.5 million edge knowledge map, effectively. And as you can see, there is no discernible information that you can pull from that hairball, as it were. So we started to look at how can you cluster this information, how can you apply it in a way that gives insight, in a way that the people within the GSK could address and create value within the drug discovery. So one of the areas we first looked at is, can you cluster these information around how often that the protein, the protein pathway, and the disease was associated into the database. And what that then left you with is, this is the human bias within the research agendas across the globe. So you get these big supernodes around very studied proteins and protein pathways that drive that system. So the big one in the center, I believe, is P53, effectively, and there's also some stuff around nematode worms and similar activity. So that just shows you the inherent bias in the data by applying that. But one of the ways that we did find that was really successful is to start pulling from the large network just specific diseases. So this was the Crohn's system. And what was really interesting about this is that we found an extra node. So the red node at the bottom wasn't one that GSK had known before, and that information was then put into their clinical advisory boards and led to further work. So by pulling out these visualizations in a way, so using clustering, unsupervised learning, and then a visualization technique, you can create actionable insights within the data sources we're analyzing. So the next case study I was going to look at is microbiome research. So we're getting quite a lot of interest in microbiome research at the moment. So this is the fauna associated with gut, soil, and human skin, effectively. The case study I'm going to talk through here is some work we did with Unilever, looking at human skin biomes. So the information we're looking at is the clinical sort of hydration of skin associated to the functionalities of the metageome, and we have a clinical data set that covers a period of time. And we're looking for the difference in hydrated and unhydrated skin for that cohort based on the microbiomes of their skin. This is a supervised learning technique because we're looking at the outcome that we already know and looking for the different microbiome fauna and faunas that achieve that outcome. The models that we've built is a workflow of data science and artificial intelligence techniques using neural networks, but also feature ranking and feature importance. And the real insight that I think we've given in this piece is the visualization that was applied in the final presentation of this work, because it could be used to describe to the formulating scientists how they could manipulate their formulations in order to achieve better skincare products in the area of microbiome analysis. So this is a Shapley plot that is shown on the right. And the way to read this plot is that the microbiome or the fauna of the microbiome are listed in the abundance from top to bottom, and the microbiomes that have a positive effect on hydrated skin show red dots on the right side of the visualization, and on the have a negative effect on hydration of skin is shown on the left side. So lactobacillus effectively has a positive effect on hydration of skin and is demonstrated within the data set to have that case. Tercilia has a negative effect in that case. So what the scientists can then do is apply these tools in a way that formulates products from a skincare perspective to increase those faunas that have a beneficial effect and decrease those faunas that has a negative effect. So this work is published and is available through through an open access Nature paper with the lead author being Anna Carrera from IBM Research, who are embedded within our Haroldtree team. So that brings me to the end of my talk today. Hope that was interesting. And if you have any questions, I'll be pleased to answer them.
Cool.